Hello, everybody. Austin Hill Shaw here, founder of Creativity Matters and author of The Shoreline of Wonder on Being Creative. Hey, I'm wanting to talk to you a little bit today about OS X Yosemite, the Yosemite operating system for for the Apple computer. And I'm not wanting to talk specifically about the features that you'll see on there. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the speed or the new ways that you can find files or all the ways that you can stay organized. What I want to talk to you today about just is simply these beautiful graphics featuring Yosemite Valley. These beautiful graphics that come here of this majestic place called Yosemite Valley. And I have a really personal relationship with Yosemite Valley because this is a place where I spent a lot of time and actually climbed a lot of these formations, including the formation that we're looking at right now, which is the famous Half Dome. The Half Dome, which sits at the east end of Yosemite Valley. It's a monolith which is about, I think it's 16 or 1700 feet high in terms of its verticality of the face that you're looking at. And in 1992, in the same month that I graduated from undergraduate school at Cal Berkeley, I went up here and did a route where I came around, hiked up from the trail and spent the night right about here, woke up in the morning, and then went over and did a route where a guy named Scott Crawford, who happened to be a roadie for Motley Crue at the time, and we climbed up to just about here. We were planning on sleeping on this. There's the ledge system right there. We made it to just about there, spent the night, and then went up the next day and climbed up there. It was about, I think, 26 pitches or something like that. But we tried to do it light, meaning we were going to go to this ledge system and use our climbing rope as a insulation pad and drape one sleeping bag over both of us, but we didn't quite make it to the ledge system there, so he ended up giving me all his clothing and he took the sleeping bag and we just hung there in our harnesses for the evening. And it was not particularly pleasant. I shivered most of the night, and at one point I remember looking at the sky and it seemed to be getting lighter, and after a while I just realized it was the moon cresting. It came over and I saw it, and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to be here for a long time. It was a bit of a miserable night. And then I went up again on this in 1998, actually the same year that anybody who's read the opening lines of The Shoreline of Wonder, climbed this in a day. Essentially started at the camp at the parking lot at 4 a.m., went up these things called the death slabs, which you can't see right here, and then got to this spot at 6 a.m., climbed the same route, and made up to the top at about 7 p.m., and then hiked down the back, made it down to the trailhead just around midnight, and then went back to where we were camping that night, which was a town called El Portal, just on the west side of Yosemite. And my job as we were driving back was simply to punch my friend and climbing partner, Dr. Aaron Hood, in the arm to keep him awake as we went back. So I spent a lot of time with this rock here. And if we go over to here, there's another beautiful picture that we got to look at here, which is kind of amazing, which is, of course, this one. El Capitan, the captain, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, monolith in the contiguous, I think, 48 states. There might be, I know there's some bigger ones up in Canada, but this is about 3,000 feet tall. And in 1991, which was in the fall of 1992, did a route called the Salathé Wall, where I climbed up a route over here and went up this area and came down here. Went down and grabbed our bags and went back up. I was climbing with 2 other people at the time, and it took us 5 days to go to the top, and that was amazing. And then in May of 1993, went up perhaps the most famous route, which is called the Nose, which goes up right about here. It's called the Nose because it just goes right up the prow of the whole formation. There's one point here called Boot Flake where you set a rope and then you rappel down and you have to run back and forth and back and forth and catch a crack system here and continue up over here through the great roof. Also had an experience. There was a group of two Spanish people, and at the time I couldn't speak Spanish, and we knew that there was this loose rock that was up here. It was going around the climbers' campground. It was about the size of a refrigerator, and sure enough, when we were over on this side of the route, kind of jogs over here, those Spaniards dislodged this, and I'll never forget the sound of that big rock coming down. I mean, this is about 2,000 feet off the ground. This area is kind of slabby, meaning it's less than 90 degrees, and there's a party, 2 guys below us there, and boy, it came really close to them. But it was, that was lucky. Anyways, kept on going up here. I think we spent our last night on here. I mean, that was the 4th night. Then went up here, made it to the top on May 8th, and on May 9th, I turned 23 years old at the top. I woke up on the top of El Capitan on my 23rd birthday. So it was pretty magnificent. And, I also have some tragedy around this. I had a dear friend named Matt Baxter, who was the first person who I did a big wall with, a big wall being basically where you spend the night on a rock formation. He died on a route over here called Zinjada Mendata when he was doing a rope solo. That means he was belaying himself up and using a seatbelt system, technology like a seatbelt system in order to belay himself, and just had a peace pole, and his rock got severed, that was a real awakening there. That happened in 1996. So there's been a lot of experiences that I've had with this. Just last week, I took my 5-year-old daughter and my almost 2-year-old daughter. We went to the El Cap Meadows out front of this and just looked at this beautiful rock. And it has such a presence to it, just such a magical presence. And so I'd like to bring this back around to what I talk to people about when I'm talking about creativity. And my basic definition of creativity, again, is simply connecting with the world and affecting it in a meaningful way. Connecting with the world and affecting it in a meaningful way. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about how those things play out when you are rock climbing. First of all, the feeling of connection. Connection, when you're a rock climber, you're alternating between these very intense states of focus. When you're either leading a pitch, that means setting the gear, or following, you're really concentrating on all the little micro features of the rock that help you ascend, whether you're in a crack system or using little knobs and crystals. And so you're kind of hyper-focused on just what your body's doing and the rock that you're moving over in those areas. And then you get to the anchor, and then you have these unbelievably huge, expansive views of places around you, especially in a place like Yosemite. I mean, you can imagine if you're 2,000 feet off the deck, how things start to look, the quality of the air that's out there, the light, and just the fact that you've been living on this monolith for several days. It's incredible. So again, you go through this experience of being hyper-focused to these huge views, right? And that's a little bit like the creative path right there. I mean, sometimes in the path, you're focused on the details of what you're trying to carry forth. And then other times you have these huge views and vistas, which are like creative insight, those moments of like those aha moments. And I think that's one of the things unknowingly, like unconsciously at the time, I was so drawn to, just that, and again, being focused, tying into your anchor, and then relaxing and just looking at the expansive views. Next is the affecting the world. Well, as a climber, there was this really great feeling of pushing your limits on some levels, of using your physical strength and your mental strength and your breathing in order to move over these beautiful, gorgeous, sensual formations. And so there was a real sense of interacting with the rock. And as you move up something like El Capitan, which is, I think the nose is something like 36 pitches, and a pitch is a rope length. I mean, you're on granite. It's all basically granite, and yet the variety of each pitch is totally different, like totally different. You talk to any climber who's done climbing out in the woods, it's like every route is distinct. every route is slightly distinct. They all have their particular signature, almost like a fingerprint. And the other thing is that when we climbed, we were not only inspiring ourselves and pushing our limits and testing our own will, but we were inspiring others, people around us. People go to Yosemite specifically to watch the climbers. Just this year, President Obama was talking to the party that ascended. I can't remember the name of the wall, maybe the North American Face, but Tommy Caldwell and somebody else who, they freed this, meaning they didn't use any of the gear to ascend. They only used the gear for protection. That's just a kind of technicality in climbing. But even when I was out there just last week, I was squinting my eyes trying to see climbers in the face. It's magnificent to see these just teeny tiny dots on these huge formations going up. And finally, there's this sense of meaning, again, connecting with the world and affecting the world in a meaningful way. Well, the meaning for me in rock climbing, again, was this sense of being connected, this little 5'10", 160-pound person ascending this face that's been there for thousands and millions of years, and a formation that's hundreds of times bigger than me, and you just try to lift one teeny rock of granite. I mean, it's heavy. There's so much mass there, and just to think that we were moving over this thing really connected me to the tides of eternity on some ways, and that was really meaningful. And the other thing that was deeply meaningful about this for me was just going into the flow state. When I was at my best on these climbing walls, when I was concentrating and I wasn't overwhelmed. There were times on walls where I was so frightened that I was overwhelmed, like I was literally paralyzed. That happened on the first wall that I climbed. I took a big fall way up there, and I wasn't hurt, but it rattled me. And yet, I had to keep going. But there's other times, like when I climbed the nose, we had a rain one morning, it dried, and then we were a little bit late getting to the place where we were going to rest. And that on that particular climb, I was the strongest climber in the party. And so I got all the gear, and we had 3 or 4 pitches, 300 or 400 feet to go. And I just got in there and got in this flow state. It wasn't particularly difficult climbing that I was doing at that time. It was just beautiful, what do they call hand cracks, something you can fit your hand into and ascend. And I was just going fast. I was just moving over the wall, and it felt so good. And again, you're moving, you're exerting yourself, you're concentrating, and you're also anticipating where you're going to put gear and monitoring your flow, monitoring your energy flow, and also, managing your fear as well. And when you find that sweet spot where you're just moving over these rock faces and feeling the immensity of the space around you, gosh, there was nothing like it. So that was one of the things that I loved about rock climbing. And really, again, that flow state, the flow state that I love to teach people about, can be applied to anything. You can apply flow to anything. It's simply a matter of testing yourself and drawing your attention to that thing that you're doing. So even if you're working on an assembly line, if you do it with a sense of curiosity, with a sense of wonder, where you really want to, again, connect with the world and affect it in a meaningful way, you can apply creativity to anything. And that's why I love to teach it to people, because again, creativity enriches our lives in so many different ways. And the more that we can apply it to whatever we're doing, whether it's parenting, whether it's doing our taxes, whether it's trying to understand a new way of working with a coworker, all these things allow us to connect with the world and affect it in a meaningful way. So I really appreciate you spending this time with me today. I'm nearing my 45th birthday. So at this time, 22 years ago, today, I was on this beautiful monolith. Somewhere probably in the area about a third of the way up. That's where I'm imagining. Somewhere kind of in this area right in here. So this has great significance to me. And again, if you've never been to Yosemite, you got to go. It's just so beautiful. It's just amazing. And again, apply creativity to whatever you do. And if you need any help in doing that, please allow me to help you. I have all sorts of different resources at austinhillshaw.com, and would love to hear of any questions or comments that you have on this. Please post those below on this post. Anyways, this is Austin Hill Shaw reminding you to connect deeply, to make a difference, and to inspire creativity in others. Thank you so much.